Hello everyone, welcome back. In the last lesson, we implemented a function for registering a new user. So let's just quickly review the process, okay? So we have the register form, right? And if you bring up your Atom editor, and within this form, we have our models, ng models binding to each input field, which has the new user instance. And this instance is coming from the register.component.ts, all right? And that's the new user we define here. So whenever we define a new instance for a class, it's better we just instantiate for future use. If you don't instantiate it like this, and you put in directly here, Angular 2 will complain as an error because this one is undefined in that case. All right. So because we are using Angular 2's two-way binding, whatever content we input to the field will be binded to the instance, right? And then by the time we click on the form's submit button, basically this form will be submitted through ng-submit, which will invoke a onSubmit method. And that method is defined in the component here, all right? And it basically uses the registration service, the send user method, okay? So the registration service, we have a send user method defined here, and it's using Angular 2's HTTP post method to send the user object data in the JSON format and pass it to the backend at this address, okay? And then we go to take a look at the backend. Bring up your Eclipse, and in the backend we have a user controller that's having the user register path to invoke the user service to save the user. All right, and the user service actually implement the user.do interface, which we extend the CRUD repository that is pre-configured by Spring Boot, and we can directly use the save method to persist the user. Okay, and we talk about two of the issues. First one is the course. Here we define a course filter. So this is coming from the Spring course filter, and we are pretty much allowing, the origins of any type. Okay, and we set a allowed method as get, put, and post, and we propagate a filter path to all the path with this two asterisk. Okay, so this is the course filter, and then we have our options filter. So here basically we are implementing a JWT filter, which is a Java Web Token filter. Okay, and it simply does when you have the HTTP request come in, we need to get the method type of it. And if this method type equals to options, we will send a response with the HTTP status as OK. And then we use the chain, the do filters to propagate this filter to all the paths. Okay. Now let's take a look at how actually the register network behavior looks like. So we can register another name, for example. And if you bring up the developer console, all right, come to this network tab, and if you register, so we can see there's some, network communications going on. For example, this one, we can see the headers. The request method is option. That's what we're talking about. When we use Angular 2 to post a method, the first method is sent out, but Angular 2 is send options. Okay. So we can see there's some request headers, and that's the response from the server. And the result basically is 200 HTTP status code which means it's okay. And after that, Angular 2 is gonna send out the real code, the real post method, okay? And now that we have the real method, we have the host location, the URL, and the request payload. Basically, the payload means the data that you want to send. We can see here we have the first name and last name, password, username attached from the form, okay? And the system basically responds with this result, and we're seeing the status code as 200, which is okay. So we get it successfully. So in this case, we don't experience any front-end side or server-side error, and we should be able to have our data persisted. Like in our user table. There we go, we have our new record. Okay, so that's basically how does it work for the front end and the back end communication and into our database. And now let's add some more materials to our register user page. So right now, after we click the register button, nothing responds, right? We want to have a message to tell the user that your registering new user is successful, and we want to hide this form, okay? So that user doesn't need to manipulate that after you register, okay? So let's take a look how to do that. First, come to our register.component.ts. We give a new variable called register, and it's a Boolean type, which will be tracking the status of the form, whether it's submitted or not. Okay, so by default it's false, which means it's not submitted. And once we submit, and be careful here, we're putting the status change inside this data callback. Why we need to put it here, not say, for example, put it here. Oops, like here. So the reason is because this register service call is asynchronous call. So this command execution will happen, pretty much in parallel with this one. So it means that this one will not, be executed after this one finish. And by the time you send out the request, we already change it. We don't even know it's successful or not, okay? So we want this behavior happen only after we have some successful result. That's why we need to put it here, okay? If you're interested, you can go take a look, see if you put it in other place and how the behavior looks like on a page. All right. And then we can come back to our register component.html. And here for our form, basically I'm gonna add a condition check, which is ng if equals registered inverse. So what this does is, when this condition is true, the form will be displayed, okay? If this is false, the form will be hidden. So by default, the registered value is false, right? And the inverse bit should be true, and this form will be displayed. And once we submit, we change the value of this registered to true, and the inverse will be false. And this whole form will be hidden after we submit. And we want to bring up another division. So that when this value actually change becomes true, the register service successful will pop up, will be displayed. Okay, let's go take a look. You want to refresh the page and come to register page. Let's register another one. Say my name and register. There we go. We have our registration successful, and the register form actually is hidden. You see how convenient it is using Angular 2's directives. Alright, so that's pretty much for this lesson. We'll continue in the next one. Bye.